Well, hello there, my friends. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how we can read and write files using the Node Core module FS. So we're going to read and write files on our computer. So in order to do this, we'll need Node.js Core Modules FS. All right, so let's create that module. So I'm just going to say const fs and set that to be equal to a require. Now remember, when we require one of the Node.js core modules, we just pop the name of the module in here, and it's called FS. All right, so now this is typically a community convention. When we require modules, we generally set the variable name equal to be the module name. Of course, we can do a lot of different things with this FS module, but in this particular lesson, we're going to focus on reading and writing files. So let's have a look at how to read a file in Node.js first. So now we need a file to read, and I'm going to create one in this directory. And I'm going to right-click here, click on New File, and I'm going to call this readme.txt. All right, so it's just a simple text file, and inside of this file, I'll say, hello world. All right, so let's save this file and go to app.js and read this file. All right, so the way we do this is just by saying fs and then read file sync. And then this is the method that we're going to use in this fs module. And that goes out and reads this file. And then this sync, it means synchronous, which is a method. So it basically means that if we had any code underneath it here, it's going to go out and read this file before it moves on to any other code. Right? So this is blocking the flow of code until it's completed. So there's an asynchronous version of this, which I'm going to show you a little bit later on, but for now, we're going to stick with this. So we need to pass through a couple of parameters in here. So the first one is going to be the file itself. This can either be the full path to the file, or if we're in the same folder with the file, we can always just write the file name. So I'm going to say readme.txt. And again, if we're in the same directory with the file we want to read, we don't need to write the full path. All right, so the second parameter we need to pass through is the character encoding, because when we go out and read a file, we're dealing with binary data, which is just zeros and ones, right? And character encoding is going to basically determine what all those zeros and ones mean and convert them into the letters that we all understand. I mean, I don't want to belittle anybody who knows their binary backwards and forwards. So, to the encoding. In this case, it's going to be UTF-8. Okay, so now I'm going to store the result of this in a variable. And then this is going to go out and read the file, and we will store what it reads in a variable. You follow? So I'm going to say text, set this equal to this string. Okay, so let's go ahead and log this to the console. So I'm going to say console log text. Let's say node app to run this file. All right, so now we can see hello world on the console. So the FS module has gone out to read this file synchronously and use this encoding. Then it's going to store the file contents in this variable and log that to the console. All right, so now I'm going to show you how we can write a file. So first of all, I'm going to read this file and store it in this variable, and then I'm going to take the contents of this variable and write it to a new file. All right, let's go ahead and figure that one out. So basically, I'm going to show you another method in this FS module. And of course, this new method will be called write file sync. And again, it's a synchronous method as well. And I'm going to show you the asynchronous version in a minute. But first of all, we will need to say where we want the file to be written. So I want this file to be written in write.txt. Then the second parameter that we need to pass through is the data that we want to write into this file, and that's going to be this text variable. All right, so let's pass it in as a second parameter. All right, so now let's run this application. And I'm going to say node app. All right, so now we have created write.txt file in here. And we can see that we have outputted the data inside the README file into this file. So we've read a file synchronously, and then we've stored the contents of that file in this variable. And then once that's complete, we moved on to the next line because it's synchronous, right? So right after that, we use the second method on this FS module. And the second method is this write file sync. We have written a new file with this method. So the first parameter of this method is the name of the file that we want to write, and that's write text file. Then we pass the content of this file as a second parameter, which is this text variable. Very good. So we have got the content of this file and pushed it into this file. So that's all well and good, and the logic is quite straightforward. But now let's have a look at the asynchronous versions of these methods. All right, so first of all, I'm going to get rid of this text variable. We don't need that anymore. And then let's take away the sync part of the read file sync. All right, so now this is going to be an asynchronous method. So for this reason, we're going to use a callback function to fire when the process is complete. And that is going to be the third parameter in this method. So I'm just going to say function, open up parenthesis, and this function will take two parameters. First parameter is going to be error, and the second parameter is going to be the data. So if there's a problem, we will get this error message, and if there isn't, we can retrieve the data from this README text. All right, so let's log out the data that we're going to get from this file to the console. So I'm going to say console log data, and then we can comment out this write file sync method. Now we can run this file. So I'm going to say node app. And we still get the hello world text, but this time it is a little bit different. So it's reading the file. Once it's read the file, then we're passing the data that it's read into this function. And then it logs the data to the console. But now the best thing about this is we're not blocking the code while this is reading the README file. You follow? If we had any extra code down in here, then this would still fire while it's reading the data. So let me just demonstrate that real quick to you. So I'm going to say console.log, and in here, let's say hi there. So I'm going to save this, run node app again. And yeah, so you see how hi there is first and then hello world, even though this is after this. All right, so we start from here, but it's asynchronous. So that means that we're carrying on to the next line. So while this file is being read, we're firing this callback function. All right, so now let's try the same thing with the write file. Let's do it inside of here. Now, because we only want to write the file once this is fully read, I'm going to say fs write file. And then we need to say which file that we want to write. And the first parameter is going to be the file name that we want to create. So I'm going to say write.text. And the data that we want to write is going to be this string. And then for the third parameter, we need to pass a callback function. Why is that, you might ask? Because it's asynchronous, and if any error happens, we need it to handle it. So let's say function, and this is going to take an error parameter. And if we have an error, then let's log that out to the console. All right, so now we can delete this write text because we're going to create the new one. All right, so now we can save all this and run the Node app. So I'm going to say Node app to run this file. Simple enough. Okay, so we've created that file again. But this time, it's an asynchronous file, and it's not going to block the other code down here. And that's pretty awesome, right? Because if you've got multiple requests in your application and you're running asynchronous code, then it's going to be a whole lot quicker. You see that, right? Because you don't have to wait for each request to be carried out first, and then the next and the next. Very cool, my friends. So that's how you read and write files. So we'll take a break right in here and come back and get you some more good things in the next lesson.